We did like a creative performance review call. I got all the creative partners on board to join us. I got my paid media guys to come in and got them to say like, all right, what are the creatives that are working and why? What are the creatives that are not working and why? And what are the ones that are almost working and that we can make some tweaks? And back it up by data. And then we all just sort of jam on it and say, okay, here are the sort of next iterations that we feel we can do. We've got this footage and that footage, and let's try a text overlay or a voiceover or a different offer, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not like we're going back to zero and reshooting the footage. It's just you're tweaking some things. And that's really the game for us.
Hello and welcome to Direct to Consumer. I'm Eric, and I am here today with Kyle Guilfoyle of the DTC team, as well as Cameron Wind, the creative director of Pilot House, here to shed some light on Srdjan Popovic's amazing CrossRope marketing that I've been caught deeply in their marketing funnel. So Srdj is an engineer by trade, but he's been in the e-commerce game since 2015. He's always had a passion for tech and challenging problems, and now he's the Chief Marketing Officer of Crossrope, and they're on a mission to become a household name in the fitness space. Crossrope is one of the first companies that actually subscribed to DTC. I noticed it right away when I'm always scanning the active campaign list, and I saw Crossrope get on there. I jumped on the domain, and I was just like, just really love what they're doing with the brand. Love the reinvention they're doing of something tried and true. And the feeling was mutual because I keep seeing Srdjan opening up our emails. So I reached out to him to try to get a sense of what his strategy is, how his strategy is working, how he's been able to help the company grow. Was it 400% in 2020, which is absolutely fantastic. And maybe talk about a little basketball as well. So welcome to D2C Podcast. How are you doing, Srdjan?
Guys, thanks for having me on the show. I'll just hit off what you just said. I got to give a shout out to Kyle if he's the head writer, because I subscribe to a lot of newsletters, and that one is, so congrats on the 10th episode or 10th newsletter, whatever it is. I'll tell you my process. This is what we do. Email comes in. There's probably like 10 to 20 gold nuggets in there. I'll read through the whole thing, click through the articles, see, and then I basically do a forward and then just basically go bang, Andy, do this, Ali, do this. And then we just sort of go through the list. There's probably something I can share in there with everybody on the team. And I do that with almost every email that you guys send out. So props on that. That's why I love opening the emails probably like 50 times by the time I find everything that I need.
We were wondering about that. I was like, is he a bot? Is Srdjan a bot? It's good to know you're a real person.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate use case.
Yeah, exactly. If that was the objective for you guys, you nailed it. So thanks for the awesome newsletter. Tons of gold nuggets from there. And I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. Like that is a medium I really enjoy.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, we really appreciate that. And that is exactly the objective, is to just pack it with so much that you can share it with people. And yeah, make everything.
And now you're a part of it on the spot to give us some sweet gold nuggets. So why don't you start first with just an overview of your path? You said you had an interesting story about joining CrossRope. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and the brand and where you guys intersected. For
sure. Yeah, it's kind of ties a little bit. I think I mentioned with the basketball piece. I've grown up, been into sports, primarily basketball, all my life. When I got into high school, played a lot of, high school ball and city ball, and that got me into like training more seriously. So I was in the weight room, getting really fascinated by the fitness space and sort of just wanted to get faster, better, et cetera. And that sort of at the same time, I had this parallel love for technology. I don't know what got me into it, but there was a class in high school, communications technology. You got to learn about how to build websites. And this is like, 2004 maybe, building websites, using Flash and doing video editing and capture. I really, really fell in love with that. Took a complete pivot, went into university for engineering. Maybe that was part of the, Eastern European family upbringing, limited choices, but learned a ton there. It was a tough 5 years, but, throughout that experience, it really built sort of like this strong work ethic and curiosity. And so when I got out of school, I did the, very first thing that all engineers do. I went and get my personal training certification. Parents love that. But that's because I was still just fascinated with, with fitness. And so that's when sort of like the tech and fitness background integrated for me. And I really wanted to launch a blog. That was sort of the big thing back in 2010. Launched a little fitness blog, wrote about all sorts of topics, but I really loved, portable fitness, or fitness that it's very accessible. So I talked a lot about bodyweight training and kettlebells and jumping rope. And so I had a YouTube channel in parallel, and I shot a couple videos. I suddenly started generating a lot of traction. It was just me doing exercises in front of the camera, and started generating one. I think one's got like maybe 5 million views up today. I haven't really checked, but at the same time, that was probably 2011. My now CEO, Dave, he launched the very first sort of version of CrossRope. It was just sort of like nunchucks and a steel cable. Still remember seeing that thing the first day, and it was a very small space. Jump rope is still a small niche within the fitness landscape, but at that time it was very minuscule. And so we instantly sort of gravitated towards each other, connected. He sent me some ropes, and since then, we started initially working together. I helped him launch an affiliate program so I could help him promote the ropes, helped him go down, do a couple trade shows, and starting in 2015, we had a little bit of traction, and he said, "Yo, come join me. There were like 1 or 2 people at the time, including him. He said, just come join me, do this marketing thing. You love it. You're doing it on the side." And I was sort of building my blog in parallel. And so in 2015, I just sort of took the leap and, joined the team. And now we're like, nearing 40 people. And,
Wow.
We've had some really great success. And that's why I always advocate to people. Just who are sort of looking at transition or getting into this game, like, you just got to do stuff, like work on some fun projects, do it for learning. You never know where the stuff's going to lead you. And I feel super grateful that I went through that journey, learned a ton along the way, ended up meeting some really cool people. And now I'm doing something with an intersecting passion of tech and fitness, and, solving challenging problems, which is what all 5 years of engineering school sort of led me into. So that's sort of my path. And, it's been a wild ride since 2015, starting from basically almost scratch, to building CrossRopes to what it is today.
I'd actually love to hear a little bit more about the impact that blogging had, because I think that it is kind of one of the most powerful things that just about anybody could do. Writing to clarify your thoughts, putting yourself out there, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if it's still, if you're still at it, or if it still somehow influences you today.
Yeah, blogging and the YouTube channel and all of it, it was a game of figuring it out as you go, sort of like the build the plane as you're flying it sort of framework. And that's sort of what marketing in general, the experience has been like for me. I have an engineering background. I don't have a marketing degree, not to say that a marketing degree is really going to help you in today's day and age, and at least from the way I see it. So it really taught me to sort of like figure out how to solve problems. Like every day was a new problem, whether, so with WordPress, figuring out and understanding the technology side of it, learning how to write properly. I've probably written hundreds of blogs. I don't do it anymore. Time is a little bit more crammed today, and I guess, so I have to sort of use it wisely, but it definitely taught me a lot of unique skills, like with the writing and the video editing, and everything was self-taught. And there's so many tools and resources out there now that really, like, the best skill is just knowing how to learn something. And for me, it goes back to university, just sort of learning how to learn and quickly. And especially in the marketing game today, things change on a weekly basis. It feels like new tools, new methods, new strategies. What worked today or this week doesn't, no longer works. And especially as you're growing and as your company is evolving, and channels are sort of getting saturated, and new players are you just got to figure it out as you go. And I think there's so many simple ways and inexpensive ways to do that, just with all these opportunities, with whether it's blogging or YouTube or podcast, et cetera, et cetera.
Very cool. Yeah. That's what I've been impressed, I think, most about CrossRopes. Obviously, I think the idea is really, really neat. I love that idea of taking something established, something that everyone understands, and reinventing it, saying you've been doing it wrong, essentially. So talk a little bit about just that, about finding that particular niche and how you've sort of reinvented it with what you've added.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the jump rope space is really small. I mean, it's, when people think about jump and rope, it automatically goes to either like Rocky or Mayweather, or like athletes and boxers using it. So for us, sort of like, as you mentioned at the intro, our mission is to become a household name in fitness. And that means making jumping rope as an activity very accessible. When people think of jumping rope, it's a skill-based activity. And so there's a little bit of intimidation there. And for us, it's always been a dual sort of challenge. Grow jump rope as a category, and sort of like position CrossRope as being the leader of that category. It's not like, some of the other brands where there's an existing category. We're creating a jump rope fitness category, right? And so that is sort of like how the product was developed in a way. It's not competing with the product, Mayweather might use to sort of show off all these tricks. It's a simple fitness tool that feeds into today's problems, which is lack of time, portability issues. People are always on the move, expense, et cetera, et cetera. And so
space is a big one. Like, absolutely. I imagine one of the most, it's probably got to be one of the highest, like, space to caloric output exercises you can do.
That's a great metric. I gotta look into that.
Yeah.
100. I mean, even from like a calorie burning standpoint, it's head and shoulders above a lot of activities. So when it comes to like how much output or how effective it is and efficient it is in a given time, like you'll get a lot more out of a jump rope workout than you will, any other, like if you go for a run or treadmill or whatever it might be. So I say all that because for us, it's all about positioning the brand as like, and you see that in our creative, whatever, like something that's fun and cheeky and all to kind of come across as accessible. We want people not to feel intimidated by this. And we've designed the product in a way that is easy for beginners to learn. And there's a lot of challenges there for us because there's education that goes into that. Nobody's used a weighted jump rope, interchangeable jump rope system before. So we have to educate people on why that is important and, how do we do that? And so, I know we're going to talk about creative, but that for us has been a big lever in the business in terms of using creative in a strategic way to sort of educate customers along the journey.
I think that's super interesting. Something that we kind of like live and die by here at Pilot House is kind of creative angles, exactly what you're talking about. And I'm curious, talking about accessibility, all these different factors that you use to sell your product and educate people on jumping rope. I'm curious like how the process has been for you guys developing different angles and how you've leaned on those through your different channels and social channels. Take us through that process and how I guess that's evolved over time, especially now that we're in the midst of COVID.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll set the context just in terms of like creative process for us a little bit. And I know I mentioned this in some of our discussions, but we don't do any creative work per se in-house. We've developed a robust sort of handful of our partnerships with creative agencies, and we've developed a pretty good workflow in terms of how to collaborate and provide feedback. And some partners may help us with sort of like top of funnel creative. Some partners are better with like quick turnarounds if we need some video edits. And so being able to pivot quickly has really allowed us to sort of like, you know, one of our core values internally is move quickly. Like things are just changing. You mentioned COVID, you know, what we're trying to do is sort of like, at least in terms of like an iterative process, is pay attention to like how, you know, creatives are doing on at different touch points, and then feeding that sort of into like this feedback loop back to all the agencies. And so it's this really robust iterative process. And so if I could give you an example, I know, for instance, we've partnered with a lot of Instagram influencers over the past 3-4 months, right? Just sort of trying to enter that channel through, and you know, we're trying to, we'll basically let them do what they want to do in terms of creative. We feel creative content creators know best what resonates with their audience. And so we took all the learnings internally and said, all right, let's figure out what the patterns are here. What's working, what's not working. And we found, for instance, that, you know, we broke up the content into 3 buckets. You know, people that use, that just show how to use the product, people that show close-ups and unboxing, and people that do a little bit of mix of both, right? And what we found is that 90% of conversions came from when it was a mix of both, like relative to the, and so you sort of like take that back and you sort of reflect on it and think about it. And, you know, you realize like, hey, yeah, our product is unique. You know, nobody knows what an interchangeable jump rope system is unless you see it up close and you see somebody clipping in a 1 pound rope or a 2 pound rope or a 1/4 pound rope, swiping through the app to see the content that leads you there. And so, you know, what we ended up doing is just taking those learnings and passing them back to all our creative partners and embedding that into sort of like the next batch of sort of creative, right? And so that's sort of like an example of like this feedback loop that's worked so well for us in terms of just paying attention to what's working at different touch points. So if you have a piece of creative and you're sort of like using it for Instagram or your own organic social channel or your own or YouTube advert, whatever it might be, sort of like pulling the learnings and sort of figuring out how you can feed that back into the iterative process. And then, sorry, it's a little bit of a roundabout, but I wanted to send the context because you're asking how we deal with different like angles and coming up with different topics. So, I mean, for us, the framework that's always been successful is meeting customers where they're at. And I think that's sort of like, whether it's creative or anything else, like that's how we think about things. Like, where are customers right now, and let's meet them there. Like, you know, and so that is just basically just, you know, like everyone else, paying attention to what's going on. So when COVID first hit in March, like we were really fortunate. We had just done this like shoot, like a video shoot, and captured some amazing footage, and just to add to our library, you know. And so when all this stuff happens, all it took for us was just going, let's put this together real quick. And within a week, we completely reframed everything on our site and everything in our messaging around kind of like this at-home thing. And because with jump ropes, there's so many angles, you know, you can, in the summer, you might want to take it outdoors and travel with it. You know, in the winter, you might want to keep it indoors. And so we just sort of like leveled up and amplified this at-home piece with this new footage we have. And so pretty much like that's, you know, we were able to turn that around in a week. And I think if there's any takeaway from that, it's sort of like have a large library of footage that you can pull from whenever needed. And that'll basically build out your full remix or mashup content for different stages of your funnel. So that's really worked. And I mean, that probably fed or led to a lot of that 400% growth that we've seen, is just being able to move quickly, iterate, and be able to leverage a larger bucket of footage that we have. And then, you know, I just said to our videographer internally, I said, hey, this is what we need. Within a week, we had all the sort of like creative needed for the different touch points. And it was kind of game over since that point.
Yeah, just having been in that funnel, like on YouTube specifically, I think I probably saw 5 or 6 different looks, different takes, different sort of, and I just was impressed at the, we call that the echo chamber a little bit, right? When you're trying to, when people are in that purchase decision, which I am for CrossRope, and hopefully we can provide our listeners a sweet promo code potentially. But yeah, like I just was impressed with that. So yeah, Kyle, you had a question about.
Yeah. I've heard many times that the art of, or part of the art of marketing is meeting your customers where they're at, and there's always been a little bit of mystery around that for me in terms of, how do you go about finding where your customers are at, and then how do you meet them there? Do you have any process around that? Do you have some sort of like tech stack to help you out with that, or how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs to be very complicated. I think it's just paying attention to what's going on in the world, and or what's going on within your community, and sort of adjusting your messaging and your creative accordingly. So in the COVID example, it was obvious. Like you follow the news, follow what people are talking about. We have for us, we're fortunate. We started building out like a private Facebook group, kind of like as an accountability group for all our customers. And we did that early on, and it's sort of like almost at 100,000 people right now. And so there's just a lot of engagement. We use that as a tool to sort of see what customers are talking about and people jumping rope are talking about. But when it comes to sort of like just external global factors, it's sort of like, hey, common sense, people are not going to be able to go to the gym. They're still going to want to get a workout in. Gyms are closing and shutting down. We know everyone's going to be looking for home workout options. I've got, a network of people who are in the fitness space. And so I see what's going on. My friend of mine owns, the F45 shut down, and he's trying to, scramble to put together some digital content like everybody was, in March and April. So for me, it was just, it's using the tools we all have at hand, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever outlets there are, the DTC Newsletter. And basically just whatever touch points you've got to sort of get a pulse on what's going on externally, and then just pivot. So some of it's even simpler than that. Like I'll give you an example of what we might do in a normal year. We know people's routines change in the summer, right? They're not as home as much. They're more on the road. And so, when we're tweaking our messaging, instead of are you looking for a fun and effective home workout, we might say something like, hey, looking for a summer workout you can take on the road. And so calling out like where they're at. We know they're going to be on the move. And so just adjusting messaging, and for different brands, it'll be a different type of seasonality that plays in. There's obviously the holidays. So for us, when New Year's comes around, a lot of it will be around resolutions and then, new you and sort of getting people started. And so just sort of like knowing what for your brand, like what those seasonality touch points and transitions are, and sort of like adapting your messaging to that. The rest, you can get a little bit more granular if you have a community, if you're just on Twitter paying attention to what people are saying about your brand. There's certain commonalities and patterns, just sort of adjusting your messaging that way.
Very cool. Cam, are you going to jump in with, this is a question that Cam brought up to me here as well, when you mentioned that you're working with multiple creative agencies, I find I think that's really interesting. How have you, has it been a strength of yours to really build those relationships out? Because I know that there can be like a bit of a chasm that you need to cross when it comes to like finding those partners and really getting that workflow down. Is that something you've really perfected?
I think so. Obviously there's, I think I was even listening to one of your recent podcasts. I can't remember the guy's name, but I think it was some sort of like bars he was selling or something. But he was basically
Midday Squares out of Montreal. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And he was saying like your core competencies should be something that you bring in house. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think it doesn't necessarily mean it can't work any other way. Right. And so the creative process for us is something that's super important. It's a big lever for us, because we use the creative to really educate people and draw attention in today's day and age. And so, we had the option sort of to go on the in-house and finding graphic designers and, creative directors, et cetera. But, I feel like if you've got a good network and you can get some really good referrals, because I feel referrals are everything. Referrals almost put accountability on both the referrer and the partner or agency that's being referred, because they don't want to lose those future referrals. So they have skin in the game to basically put forth their best effort. So I found, referrals have always been the best way to find external partners. And then, yes, there are pros and cons to having agency partners. And for us, it's just been positive because we're so involved. And I think there are different ways to work with partners. I have, friends who work, basically they don't talk to the partner for a quarter, and then there'll be like a quarterly discussion, and then you move on and their targets. And I think that can work for some brands. For us, like, we're talking almost every day. Like, it's almost as if they're and I have that expectation. If that is not something that the agency can provide, then I'll find the next one. And so that sort of thing almost like gets them to fully understand like what we're after and the details and everything. And sometimes that causes some challenges, but I find there's just a lot of value in agencies because especially today, like, a lot of people try to, reinvent the wheel in terms of what's working, but there's so many amazing brands out there doing amazing things in different, like, whether it's in paid media or creative or so, whatever it might be. They've figured it out. They're creative, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And having access to partners who can see sort of like this broader view of their portfolio in terms of what's working for brands and what's not, and feeding that back to us, that gives us a lot of headway into not having to like sort of like figure it out on our own. Like, okay, this is working for most of your brands. Let's do that as well. Let's put our flair on it. Let's put our spin on it. And then same thing, we've got, our paid media partners, hey, our performance is down. Is this something that's unique to us, or are you guys seeing this in aggregate across your portfolio? It's an aggregate. All right, then let's not spend too much time on it. Let's move on to the next thing and sort of like revisit it next week, whatever it might be. I just think, to me, that value that agencies were able to bring, and partners, especially if they're really fully bought in, has been really successful for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like, continuing on the thread of creative, looking through all of your, different channels and your marketing efforts, it's apparent that you guys have an awesome portfolio of creatives that are obviously diverse, different formats, and hitting people at the right point within the funnel for you guys. But that's difficult for a lot of people that we chat with, kind of designing creatives that are designed for your funnel specifically. And I'm kind of curious, like, how you package or transfer knowledge from your internal team and what you guys think you need creatively. How do you transfer that knowledge to your creative partners to ensure that the creatives that they're delivering are best designed for your marketing efforts? Because we often see, like, as we're sending out creative requests to, UGC creators, freelancers, etc., it seems to be broken down in that process of sending out briefs, what you're looking for, especially on the UGC side. As we get back creatives, it's not always like on par with what our clients are looking for, or what we're looking for. They kind of take ownership over the process. So I'm just curious, like, how you kind of transfer that knowledge and make sure you get exactly what you need to deploy within Facebook or whatever channel it need be.
Yeah, it's the age-old problem, right? Like, what you have in your mind might not necessarily be what the end product looks like, because there's that gap there between, and the difficulty of explaining it. So, I'd say the approach is really like a volume game, right? Not every creative we put together is a win. And so for us, I think it's building kind of a creative process where, again, we're paying attention to what other brands are doing and sort of like using that as a platform or as a sort of starting ground to say, okay, this is working for these brands. What does our version of that look like? So we're not starting from full scratch where it's like completely out of left field. Like there are some elements to that that's working. Like for example, you'll probably notice with some of our YouTube creative, there's a comedic element, right? It's not serious. It's not like a Peloton ad. There's a little bit of comedy to it. And I feel that there's an entertainment ingredient to a lot of creative that makes it engaging enough for getting somebody to watch and click through. So we try to, infuse the creatives with these ingredients that we know are successful. Now, whether that means the creative will actually, perform and hit the targets that we have, not necessarily, but we try to make sure that every creative that we build has a few iterations. We'll shoot multiple intros, we'll shoot multiple outros. And what it ends up being, it's like, okay, this version did not work. Why? And then let's flip the intro. Let's pull footage from our library and just infuse it in here. So it's an iterative process. And so we do these, creative, we just did one yesterday. We did like a creative performance review call. I got all the creative partners on board to join us. I got my paid media guys to come in and got them to say like, all right, what are the creatives that are working and why? What are the creatives that are not working and why? And what are the ones that are almost working and that we can make some tweaks? And you back it up by data, and then we all just sort of jam on it and say, okay, here are the sort of next iterations that we feel we can do. We've got this footage and that footage, and let's try a text overlay or a voiceover or a different offer, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not like we're going back to zero and reshooting the footage. It's just you're tweaking some things. And that's really the game for us. You don't know what's going to work until you put it out there. And sometimes what works now won't work later. And you sort of tweak and shoot the next thing. But to me, I think if I could sum it up, it's really like paying attention to what's working for other brands, figuring out what those key ingredients are that make a creative successful. For us, like the comedic element works, doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. Some brands, it doesn't make sense to do that, but maybe there are other elements, other key ingredients that could work. Figuring out what those are, building those into sort of like make sure all your creative partners or internal creative team knows that and builds the script and sort of the story around that. And then just creating lots of variations, lots of shoot the footage. You're already on the set. Might as well, getting a couple extra shots here and there, different intros or angles or whatever it might be. Now you've got this sort of like almost like Play-Doh to work with in the editing space. Try some things out, see what works, run your hypotheses. If it doesn't work, you iterate. So that's kind of been our process.
Nice. Looks like it's working.
Very cool.
Yeah. Would you actually mind touching on how you manage your influencer marketing strategy program? Anything around compensation is always a juicy topic as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about that.
It's a short answer, Kyle. We've got an agency partner that helps us manage all of that. And I think, we've got our team's grown, but our marketing team is actually still fairly lean. And so, there's just, especially when it comes to like new channels, like the Instagram influencers channel is new for us. Like we only took that on, 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm not going to build an internal team to sort of like test that. It's more so reaching out to the network. Hey, who's really good at influencer marketing? Okay, these guys, let's talk, let's figure it out. And then let's run some tests and let's see what that looks like. But honestly, like the logistics of running an influencer campaign, like the right way, like is very, at least from my experience, complicated. Like you need, like this agency, I see what they do day in, day out, and sort of like working with with all the different influencers. We probably got like in the hundreds, right? Working with the different influencers, negotiating on the deals, whether is it a gifted plan, is it a paid plan, what can we, how can we use the content, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, on that front, you know, that agency has just been sort of like very helpful in being experts in that space. And if we see at some point that is a channel, this really goes for any channel. Like if we see there's a channel that's really crushing it and it makes sense to bring in house, you know, that is a project and an endeavor to make sure you do it the right way. We would do that. But at this stage, I mean, for us, it's sort of like in this hyper growth phase, like it's just who in the space knows what they're doing. And let's just get them, like our ability to move quickly again on something like that has just been more valuable than sort of like trying to go all in on something that hasn't necessarily been proven. So I don't have a direct answer on how to manage the influencers, unfortunately. But that's been our experience.
As an agency, we love to hear it. You know, we just love to hear that because we love to find clients who work like this with us as well, right? So like, and it's so much on both parties. It's obviously on the agency because they're being paid for it, but it's so much dependent on how much the people who with the real passion really understand the product are kind of putting into it. And it sounds like you've been able to build a team that's really good at leveraging these external sources. I wanted to talk about your marketing mix though. Just because I've seen you, I know I've seen Facebook and Google, obviously. I can't remember if there's been other platforms that have kind of followed me across, but I'm curious, like what has been, since the crazy growth of March, like where are you finding your wins, or what platforms are you really psyched about, would I say?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like we had, obviously, probably like any other at-home fitness brand, or let's just say non-gym fitness solution, sort of saw a bump up and sort of in the March, April timeframe. And so for us, it was, I mean, we've been preaching sort of like this at-home workout or portable workout thing since we started like 8 years ago, right? Or since our CEO started 8 years ago. And so it wasn't anything new. We just suddenly got this like big megaphone on us right now, and our message just got amplified because that's what people were looking for and looking to hear. So I know, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and they did see a major lift. I think we used that opportunity to take on new channels. We took on podcasting. We took on some more robust affiliate programs. We took on the influencer marketing piece, et cetera, et cetera. And so the challenge in those phases is that everything is working, like literally everything is working. And so now as things are starting to sort of settle down, so to speak, or at least normalize, like we knew it was going to be a big spike and it's going to land somewhere. So it's identifying which channels are worth keeping or doubling down on of those new channels, and which ones are, let's put a pause and we've tested. So we were fortunate in that this amplification provided by, these global events allowed us to test some channels that we were going to test out at some point anyway, just allowed us to do it sooner, generate some learnings, and really assess like how this channel performs for us and how it integrates to the overall marketing mix. I don't have an answer yet in terms of which ones we'll end up keeping and which ones we'll end up, or I should say keeping and doubling down on, and which ones we'll end up pulling back on. I think a lot of it is also from a seasonality standpoint, but I think it's given us a lot of learnings and insights so that, say we pull back on podcasting right now, we know what we can expect sort of from different types of shows, that when it's peak season for us and we want to go all in, now we can sort of do that. And we've got the relationships there with how we want to, if we wanted to move quick, getting podcast advertising set up takes a bit of time. So for us now, we have this partner and we have sort of like the connections, and we can just be like, all right, within a week, we want to start back up again. It's high season. So I think that's where more of the value has come from in terms of like the marketing mix. Our main channels like paid social, paid search, et cetera. So those are going to be continue to be winning, channeled for us. And I think it's just understanding, like, if you've got your, you know, budget in terms of what you want to spend, how much do you want to dedicate that to your winning channels? How much do you want to dedicate that to your experimental channels? Having some sort of like guideposts, I guess, to warn you if you're sort of getting off track and if you need to pull back or on some things. And so that's kind of like how we've approached the marketing mix. I never thought I'd take on 4 or 5 new channels in a quarter. And it was definitely a challenge, but you know, it was learned a tremendous amount in a short period of time that I know will be fruitful sort of like in 2021 or, you know, whatever the sort of next few months kind of present us with.
Very cool. I'm always interested in podcast advertising, obviously. Like, how are the early returns on that channel? How are you, because you say you don't want to spend too much on Facebook, that's easy. On Google, that's easy. You know by the click what you're spending. Whereas with the podcast angle, I'm sure the partner helps normalize this as well and helps set expectations. But what have the early returns been like on the podcast, and how have you measured them?
I mean, yeah, podcasting, it's almost like billboard advertising to a degree, right? I mean, the attribution is always the challenge when it comes to some of these channels. For us, I mean, as the returns were mixed. I mean, you know, we went on Joe Rogan's show.
Oh, really? I didn't. Oh, that's awesome. I was going to suggest, like, he's a CrossFit nut, right? That's really cool. How was that?
Yeah. It was okay. It was okay. I mean, it was definitely the most expensive show. And if you're going to test podcast advertising, you want to go sort of like into the big shows to make sure you get enough exposure, I guess. And it was sort of like mixed results. I mean, some shows that you wouldn't expect did better than others, and some shows like the Joe Rogan show, in my mind, like, you know, Joe Rogan, you know, MMA, you know, he uses a jump rope. I've seen his other shows. He's talked about jumping rope, perfect fit, right? Let this guy just kind of like do his thing. And he sort of just does like a regular read or whatever, and no personalization, et cetera. And you start to realize, like, all right, it really depends on this. Like, I'm not going to get convince Joe Rogan to personalize this thing unless we're like 10 episodes, you know, 10 shows in. And we're not going to test 10 shows. Like, we're going to test 2 or 3, see how it does in aggregate. So the personalization wasn't there as much as I thought it would be. Same thing with we did hot boxing with Mike Tyson. You'd think like, hey, Tyson, right? And he sort of like just spitballed a couple things, but you know, it was okay. And then you had some other shows that just, especially in like the political space, like Ben Shapiro did really well.
Oh, interesting.
And so you just kind of like learn what categories work for you and which ones don't. And in terms of like figuring out, like, we just sort of use like the same attribution, I guess, strategies like I think most brands use when it comes to podcasting, sort of figuring out what your multiplier is by using sort of like a post-purchase survey, since very few of your conversions are going to come from the last click. So it's just sort of making sure all those pieces are in place. If there's any takeaway, I mean, for us, we had like a sort of like a separate little pop-up that came up on the post-purchase. We had maybe like a 20% response rate. And then we introduced Inquire. I'm sure you guys, maybe you've heard of it, but it's just a simple Shopify plugin that embeds it in your checkout. And our response rate bumped up to like 60%. And so, which, you know, it's just like a post-purchase survey, but it gives you so much more data, like on the attribution side, to be able to like refine and sort of like look back to see like how effective are these channels truly. And so that's been really sort of like the learnings for us on that front.
Nice. And how they work together too. That's always the big challenge, is figuring out the attribution of the halo effect they cast on all others.
If you have an answer for that, let me know.
Yeah, exactly. We're working on it all the time. I've got 2 more questions. We got our final question. One more before that. You mentioned beefing up your affiliate program, and affiliates, you know, I come from the affiliate world. Victoria is a big affiliate hub. It's actually the founders of Pilot House both came from that affiliate marketing world, that scrappy performance marketing. And I really feel like for e-commerce brands, there's a real renaissance happening where they're really embracing it. Can you talk a little bit about your affiliate program and then what you did to beef it up specifically?
Yeah, so we've kind of got like this two-pronged affiliate program approach. Like we were very fortunate to, partner up with these two guys. Like if you ever go on YouTube and you want to see jump rope content, you're going to come across the jump rope dudes. So if you've done any research there, you've likely come across some of their content. And so they were one of our very early affiliate partners, and sort of they really bought into the CrossRope like mission and what we're all about.
You wanted Rogan to.
Yeah. But they really bought into like the jump rope fitness category growth and expansion. Like you can jump rope for all sorts of reasons, but if you're looking to get in shape like that's sort of like the category we're trying to grow. They've really bought into that and sort of like built their whole like YouTube brand around CrossRope. And so that's really, you go to, for anybody who's sort of like researching or looking up jump rope, or they're trying to get into the exercise, they're going to come across their content in some way, shape, or form. And they've, so they were one of our early and to this date, like our most successful, like affiliate just general partner, right? In terms of like growing the mission. And so we've sort of like try to do the same thing. You'd keep an eye out for other jumpers and other fitness influencers, just getting people like really bought into the brand as affiliates, and some worked and some didn't. We sort of like wanted to take a different approach. We've always had this sort of like, it's sort of like a pain point really. Like when I see a men's journal or a men's health article come out with like the best jump ropes or the best, portable fit, there's never a CrossRope listed. Like, they'll have some sort of garbage options there just because of how they operate with their affiliate networks, right? Like whether it's Amazon or commission jump, whatever it might be, that's where they're pulling their from. So I really wanted to figure out we wanted to figure out how to get into some of these mentions. Like these are big publications. So we just sort of like, again, found a partner that is an expert in that space. And, the question is just, hey, how do we get in front of all these people on these publications? And so they have the connections and with all these publishers and these editors, et cetera, they structure the affiliate deals. They got us sort of like back on Share a Sale, sort of like the affiliate platform. And so they're helping us get into all these publications on content that's already going to be published. So it's just extra eyeballs for us, and we'll gladly, I said, pay that that commission for something like that. And for us, it's just everything is just about getting as many on as many touch points as possible. If we're going to grow, get jump rope top of mind for people, like we just got to be everywhere. And that's why we're sort of growing in all these channels. So we're still figuring that part of the affiliate program out. Like it's a very interesting field. And so hopefully that sort of shakes out in the right way for it. But that one's relatively newer and something that we've started sort of dialing in a little bit more with the partner.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Well, Srdjan, this has been so great. And we have just one more wrap-up question that we like to ask. And that is, if someone were to give you a $50,000 grant for your business, how would you spend that money?
I'd probably put it into creative. I'd schedule a bunch of shoots and sort of think ahead for the next 1, 2, 3 years, think about what we need, get top-notch talent, get top-notch videographers, et cetera, and just get a lot of footage that we can then remix throughout the next 3. We have this sort of running joke is that there's never been a piece of creative or content that hasn't been that hasn't returned something for us. So for me, I mean, we already spend quite a bit on that, but if I had an extra, I mean, definitely put it into some of these foundational assets that are just going to drive awareness for the brand.
I love it. That's a great answer. And a great way to wrap up here. So direct to consumer listeners, if you're listening, we've agreed offline. We have secured a 10% discount for CrossRopes using the promo code DTC10. Let's give Joe Rogan a money. Give Joe Rogan a run for his money. We're a small but mighty group here, but let's see if we can put a few sales through. We'll all get fit together. I'm gonna buy one after the fact. We might do a little funnel hack. And I'm super excited. So thank you so much for coming on today, Srdjan. So keep opening our emails 19 times, please.
Will do, guys. Keep doing amazing work. I'm looking forward to the newsletters, and then keep in touch. Yeah, wish you guys the best of luck. Thank you for having me on the show.
All right. If people want to get in touch, obviously crossropes.com. Are you a Twitter guy?
I'm more of a LinkedIn guy.
Okay.
I mean, I feel that's not as common of an answer, but LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with me via DM or whatever.
Cool. All right, man. Well, talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. All the best.
I want to give a special shout out to our brand new sponsor, one of a few that will be debuting over the next few weeks, #paid. We like to say goodbye influencers, hello creators. You can get consumers talking about your brand and buying your products with creator marketing. They're basically a one-stop shop for every kind of social content you might want to use in your ad funnel. They offer full service, a whole bunch of different packages. You got to go check them out at #paid.com.